I'm really just excited and grateful to be able to come together tonight. Just a couple quick pieces of business before we get going with our speaker. One, I was just reminded of, we are recording the event tonight, so just a point of information, and if you have any concerns, let us know. We're here for part 2 of our conversation of MPD 150, a People's Project Evaluating Policing. We want to welcome everyone, whether you made it last week or not, or you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. I'm really grateful for our neighbors, Sarah and Aaron, for helping to organize these events, and Sarah Linus Robinson on the technical support and promotions. Before we even introduce the speaker, I want to turn it over to another neighbor who's going to share with us a little bit about what's coming next. So we have some more information about upcoming sessions. So is Katie ready to share?
Yep. Everybody, thanks for being here. Good to see folks. So this session is part of the 100 Days of Community that we've been doing in Kingfield, which is oriented around getting connected, meeting neighbors, doing anti-racist learning about how we build safety beyond policing, and especially what's the role of a neighborhood in Minneapolis in that. And thanks to the crew who has planned these 2 sessions with MPD 150 and our presenters. And emerging from conversations with neighbors is the idea that after these 2 sessions and heading into the summer, we're going to do a more intensive learning and action-oriented group to start to identify and answer more specifically as we can together that question of what is the role of a neighborhood and what can we do as a group of neighbors to start building and learning about safety beyond policing more specifically and taking action towards that together. Projects, policy work, anything that might involve. So if that is something that's interesting to you, if you would like to be a part of that, maybe 4 to 6 to more sessions of learning and planning together for work in the neighborhood, we'll send information in a follow-up email after this. You can also message me in the chat and let me know. I think it'll be a really great opportunity to get more stuff in place in our participation as neighbors, and also potentially participate as a group of neighbors in citywide projects that are going to be happening through the summer, like deep canvassing, which is a practice of having really intentional relational conversations with people around the city about these issues, and other stuff that I think is going to emerge from different organizations around the city. So if any of that is interesting to you, more information coming, or message me, or look for follow-up info after this session.
Great, thank you so much, Katie. So I'm personally really excited to have tonight's conversation. I know it's so important to discuss the history and the precedent, but I'm really grateful for this chance to engage in this sort of, collective visioning and talking about what else, community safety could look like, and to be able to do that with our neighbors and our community, and, build and foster and share in this process with each other. So one last thing before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to remind you of the guidelines for the conversation that Sarah shared with us last week. So as we go into the conversation tonight, I'd like us to have these 3 goals in mind. We will speak and listen with respect. We'll share from our own experiences, thoughts, and feelings, and we will all share responsibly for this conversation. And I know, it's a great group, and I'm excited to get into it. So with that, I'm happy to welcome Sheila Najad. She is a local organizer and political educator. Sheila's work focuses on safety beyond policing and the radical possibilities of municipal budgets. Sheila came into community organizing on LGBTQ rights, and in the decades since has been active in fights for racial, social, and economic justice. She's a core member of MPD 150, policy organizer at Reclaim the Block, Minister of the Interior at Ricardo Levin's Morales Art Studio, and candidate for mayor of Minneapolis. So please join me in welcoming Sheila.
Hello, welcome everyone. It is so nice to be with y'all today. I didn't include in that bio because it was already so long, was former board chair of the Lyndale Neighborhood Association. So I love me some progressive neighborhood work on safety. We hosted a very controversial session on reimagining safety back in 2017. So controversial that Fox 9 came and covered it. And it was just a conversation like tonight of like thinking about what could alternatives to police be. So how far we've come in 4 years, very exciting. Happy to be with y'all today. We just have an hour together, so I'm gonna get right into it. So what are we doing today? So first of all, quick show of hands, hearts, reactions. How many folks were at last week's session on history of policing? Great, okay, good. So we got at least over half of folks. Great, love it. So today what we're gonna do is talk about kind of putting that work into practice. So we are going to explore how we can cultivate safe homes, safe streets, safe schools, and communities without policing. And what you can expect from today's session is that we won't leave with all the answers. Believe it or not, we're not going to solve it in 1 hour, but just hold with that, right? Like this is part of a long journey and opportunity to build together. Second is that talking about safety and policing involves both individual experiences and systemic issues. And I'd encourage you to stretch into whatever part of that spectrum feels less comfortable for you. So if you're someone who can, talk about the oppressions of capitalism and impacts of mass incarceration, I'd encourage you to stretch into feeling, what does safety in your home feel like? What does safety at work feel like? Ground in that individual. That makes sense. And the next thing is related to me as a facilitator. I have a really hard time reading the chat and also speaking at the same time. It's one of those like walking, chewing gum issues. So I would ask that if you would like to raise a question or a comment or whatever, just do like this and write stack in the chat. And then we'll go in order of whoever puts those comments, and you can just unmute and speak. And that way the conversation, we don't end up with dual conversations and, Anyway, so that's my ask of you. And we're going to get started right away with some breakout groups. So I'm going to, actually, Sarah's going to put you into groups of 3, and I'll drop these questions in the chat afterwards. But the questions are, why did you come to this workshop? What questions do you have? And if you came last week, what's something you learned at last week's session? So there are 24 of us, and we're going to go into groups of 3, and let's give it 6 minutes in each group. So everyone gets 2 minutes to share, and then we'll come back. Oh, Erin, you're so on top of it. Okay, great. All right, so let's go ahead and break out groups of 3, and we will come back at 7:20. Neighbors. And let me open up. Okay, so if you don't have a paper pen, go ahead and grab one now, because the next thing we're going to do is a fun interactive exercise. So I'll give you a minute to grab a paper and pen, or if you're on a computer and you can write on that, or excuse me, draw on it, go for it. So we're going to do a little exercise starting at that systems level of things. So what I'd like you to do is, on your piece of paper, draw a police station at the center. And then draw everywhere in Minneapolis where you have seen police or where you know there are police, and connect them with lines to that police station. So as a starting example here, I have a hospital, right? We know the police go to the hospital. So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes, brainstorm as many places as you can think of where there are police. Okay. You can keep going if you'd like, but I'd love to hear from some folks. Where are some of the places that you see police in the community? You can go ahead and I'm going to break my own rule. You can drop it in the chat since it's only a 1-word or 2-word answer. Where do you see police in Minneapolis? Schools, okay. Public transit, yeah. Parks, parades, protests, gas stations, at home, cruising around the neighborhoods or the businesses, traffic traps, neighborhoods, the freeway, highways, yeah. Yeah, so your map might look a little bit like this, right? Homes, I see them outside of Target a lot, or Cub, depending on what part of the city you're in. Actually, they seem to be everywhere. This is my festival thing. So, getting ahead of myself. So my next prompt for you is look at all your lines on your spider web that you have there and cross out ones where you think we don't need police to be there right now. And after you've crossed off those places that are easy, this isn't a spot where we need police, draw circles around the lines where we need some sort of response. We need to dream and think of a new way of responding to violence or harm. Draw a circle around those lines. So I'm curious, of these places that you listed, which ones did you X out saying we don't actually need police there? You can go ahead and drop in the chat. Schools, yep. Okay. Parks, right? Cruising around, yep. Yeah, so your map might look a little bit like this, right? I think, yeah, buses, I don't know why I didn't have an X on the bus. That's my bad. But there's a lot of places right now where we have police that don't have anything to do with responding to 911 calls for when someone is in crisis, right? So this is just an illustration of all the places. And when we say building towards a police-free future, it doesn't mean getting rid of police overnight, right? It means looking at these places, where are easy places to start? And where are the places like responding to calls for homes that we need to think of and create something new? So thanks for doing that exercise with us. This is from my friends, our friends at Reclaim the Block. So the shared value that I like to start with is that most of us in Minneapolis want the same thing: to live in safe communities where all of us can thrive. We want to live in a city where people feel peace of mind because they have their basic needs met, and they know their neighbors' basic needs are met too. And we want to live in a city where all of us have someone we can trust to call on for help when we need it. So if we are learning from our history and trying to build towards a police-free future and alternatives to policing, what do we do instead? I want to bring another voice into the mix here. I know the number one thing happening in Minneapolis media is around carjackings, right? So I wanted to share a story of what restorative justice, what an alternative to paying for helicopters to arrest kids, which is what we saw this fall, right, in response to carjacking, what an alternative could be. I'm going to mute myself and play the audio and let me know if you can't hear it. I just don't want it to reverberate for you.
And we reached out to the young person, and he pretty quickly took responsibility for it.
And was very open to meeting with his victim and making it right. We received a case about a stolen car, and we reached out to the young person, and he pretty quickly took responsibility for it. And was very open to meeting with his victim and making it right, and explained that he was really poor, but he was willing to get a job and try to figure out, how to do right by the victim. So we reached out to the victim, and the victim was extremely unhappy that
the case had been diverted. She actually knew a little bit about diversion because she worked for a law enforcement type entity, and was adamant that she had been out of pocket $4,000 in costs because of this car, and wanted to see $4,000. And so in meeting with the young person and his family, his mother's documented working multiple jobs, they were living in the most in the kinds of poverty that we just shouldn't have in the United States, with so many other people's children living with them just to have a place to eat. And I knew that this mother and this young man were not coming up with $4,000. And so the person I was training at the time asked me, so are we going to send the case back? Because there's no way this woman's getting what she wants. So I go back to her and I say, would you have any interest in doing this, even if $4,000 might not be the outcome? Is there some other reason to do this? And she'd brought a friend with her that day, and he said, I would really love for you to move forward. And she said, I just want to meet with this kid and tell him that what he did wasn't okay. And her friend said, I really like to meet with this young man too. And so on the day of the conference, was very powerful. Her supporter, the person who would come with her, at one point, as the youth who'd stolen the car couldn't remember what color the car was, and it became evident that he'd stolen many cars, and the victim is getting angrier and angrier, and you're never going to learn your lesson. And at this point, her friend leans in and he says, I know you. And my heart stopped, because I was like, oh, we usually research these things better, and I had no idea there was a pre-existing relationship between these two parties. And he says, I know you because I used to be you. And he proceeds to tell the most powerful story about how he himself got caught up in stealing cars, and it derailed his life, and how he got his life back on track. And it was as if the rest of the room disappeared, and this young man and this man who turned his life around engaged in a dialogue about how does one turn one's life around. And he says, you have to stop hanging out with your homies in the way that you used to, but don't cut them out of your heart. Just don't include them in every aspect of your life. So you show up for the baptism, but you don't stay for the after party, right? And you always say, I got to get to work, and they respect that. So what makes you happy? What do you believe in, about yourself, or what are you good at? And the kid pops up and he says, I'm a really good artist. And his mother starts laughing. And she says, you can't pay this woman back $4,000 with your art. And just then the victim jumps in and she says, oh, yes, he can. Yes, he can, actually. She was so moved by this dialogue, right, that she says, if he paints me a Tinkerbell as tall as I am, it's like she was about 5 feet tall, as tall as I am, I'll forgive all the debt. And we're all looking at each other like, a Tinkerbell? I'm sorry, did she say Tinkerbell? So I start taking notes, and she's describing the exact Tinkerbell and what color the Tinkerbell needed to be. And it had to be an old school one without too much cleavage. So she's very particular about the Tinkerbell. And the kid is really excited, but he's also like, I don't know how I would canvas and what she's describing. And I'm like, we'll find you a community artist person who will help you with this. And so I was thinking of my friend Evan, who I knew would definitely be interested in doing this. And so ultimately, the young man does paint this. He just within a few weeks, he got a job, he raised enough money for all the art supplies. He wanted to do it himself. Painted the most amazing rendition of Tinkerbell on canvas, and the victim asked him to bring it to her home and help him install it. And then he ended up getting involved with other community art projects and actually getting involved with the program at Community Works, where he had been involved in this case, and just helping out other kids who'd gotten in trouble. So his life turned around completely, and he stayed out of trouble consistently after that. And the Tinkerbell was really beautiful. But I think what's really, when people ask what do victims want, it's different in every case. And I always think you never know, it might be Tinkerbell. Like, you have no idea what is going to leave a crime victim satisfied. So some people might say, oh, that's soft on crime. He stole a car and he gets to paint something. But if that's what the victim wanted, and that's what keeps him out of trouble for the rest of his life, then we should be really happy about Tinkerbell.
All right. So, a story of restorative justice. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So, if we are not using police to respond to some situations, what do we do? So we're going to move into another exercise. And I'm wondering, okay, there's 25 of us. I actually wonder, Sarah, if we can move into breakout groups again. And I'm going to explain the exercise, and then maybe if we can go into breakout groups for 10 minutes, because I want people to be able to have some discussion. So what is this screen? I don't know. Okay, so imagine a situation where your neighbors might call the police. I'm going to just show the whole graphic. So in this instance, I'm going to let you brainstorm it. So imagine a situation where your neighbors might call the police. What would be other ways that you could respond to that situation? And then after you've kind of brainstormed some of those ideas. So, okay, let's say that there's a fight. Someone's having a fight in the yard. And that might be something that someone would call the police. What would other options be for responding to that fight? Maybe going to talk to them. Maybe another neighbor who knows that family who could go over there. Maybe you just keep an eye on it and see if things escalate, And then after you talk through that, think through, how could we prevent this situation from happening in the first place? What are the conditions that led up to this fight happening, that led up to this crisis point of something that neighbors might call the police about, And really, really think expansively on that. And maybe brainstorm a couple situations on both ends of this. And then we're going to have some discussion, and then we'll come back for a full group. I know folks are hungry for discussion, so we'll do it in both small groups and the larger group. Do these instructions make sense to folks? Yeah? Okay, great. Erin, you're so on top of it. Amazing. So let's go into breakout groups of 5 people, and we'll do, oh gosh, time is going fast, 5 people, and let's do 10 minutes. So try to get at least through one situation, and then we'll come back and discuss together. Awesome. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. I know that was short and sweet. That's the teaser trailer for you to join the longer series with the neighborhood this summer. I would love to hear from at least one group, maybe two, about what did you talk about? What were some solutions you came up with for response and prevention? Is there a group that feels excited about sharing about your conversation? If not, I will call on someone at random. I'm the daughter of two teachers, so I'm not afraid. Kim?
Yeah, well, I can share what we talked about a little bit. I mean, our situations we had were all sort of a little bit similar around, you know, issues with theft or in like kind of intruder type situation. And we talked about having some sense of options in terms of knowing you could, you know, get a hold of a lot of your neighbors really quickly and have, you know, a collective response instead of feeling like you were sort of on your own. And when we talked about prevention, we talked a lot about, you know, how could we get more resources and make more resources available and have those resources be really localized, right? Like just even at a lot of different points in the neighborhood where if somebody seems, you know, in need of something, there's a place to send them instead of just being like, sorry, you don't get stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Love it. Centralized resources, knowing your neighbors, right? I know when I moved to a new neighborhood, right, I don't feel as safe because I don't know my neighbors yet. So my number one feeling of safety is getting my phone tree set up. Is there another group that would like to share about a situation that you discussed? Yeah, Michelle and Mark.
Well, I don't know. This is just relating to the calling your neighbors thing. I mean, maybe in, you know, my neighborhood, most people are nice, but I know I've got neighbors with who have plenty of guns. I don't want them coming over either if they, you know, they're not trained to handle you know, an intruder coming into my house without threatening, you know, me and everybody around. I mean, that's worse than the police, if you ask me. Who at least should have some, you know, sense of, I hope anyway, a sense of proportion. Not always, of course, but maybe more than my redneck neighbor.
Kingfield drama. Yes, so sounds like when building these alternatives, when choosing how to respond, we want to use our discretion, right? About making sure that we're getting the best response for the,
But I mean,
situation.
But does that person, how do we know if that person is, you know, is going to be sensible or off the handle? You know, your neighbor, you don't know them that well. And what about, you know, liability? If you don't know how they're going to behave, or maybe someone comes over with, they're feeling crazy, they're going to come with a baseball bat. I don't know what, but I mean, you know, what about liability or anything? I mean, I don't know. It just seems like it's opening up. I see the potential, but I worry about the actual, what might actually happen in a lot of situations.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, that's how I feel about calling the police too. Okay, let's go over to Pamela. And then I'm excited to see this discussion kicking off, and let's go ahead and put stack in the chat so I can keep track and make sure everyone gets a chance to share.
All right. I was thinking about Michelle's reaction, which I think is incredibly valid, because we always hear that statement, the good guy with the gun, right? Well, you know, but what's interesting then about knowing your neighbors is having that discussion and knowing them enough that they say, I do own a gun, I'm trained in how to use a gun, or I'm trained in de-escalation, right? So that we have those in-depth discussions, and as a neighborhood or even a block association, we have that conversation about what do we need to do together to respond to a break-in on our street. That way you're not wondering, oh boy, is that one neighbor who, has that gun, are they going to show up and are they going to react improperly? So if we can spend time together, get to know each other and actually plan our responses, we mitigate that, maybe not eliminate it, but we mitigate that problem from occurring. So thanks for letting me jump in there.
Yeah, thank you so much. Did I see someone else with their hand raised? Okay, great. Cool. Awesome. Thank you all so much. So again, this is a much longer discussion than just 1 hour. So consider this like a taste of things to start thinking about and having block conversations or joining with the longer conversations in the neighborhood. So I wanted to lift up and share some examples of alternatives that are a little bit more institutionalized than just neighborhood response, which I think can go a long way too, right? But we always ask, okay, if not the police, then what? And these are some ideas that are already in practice across the country. So Common Justice is a restorative justice program in Brooklyn and the Bronx, and they are an alternative to incarceration and victim service program, including responding to and supporting crime victims of very serious crimes and felonies. CAT 911 is an alternative 911 response that sends out folks for intervening in conflicts, domestic violence, sexual violence, mental health crises, acute first aid needs, and paramedics. Yes, I can send all these to y'all as well. And Cahoots is one we hear a lot about and that we're kind of working to build a Minneapolis model similar to. So I was sharing in my small group, Cahoots is a program in Eugene, Oregon that was started to divert some 911 calls that were related to mental health emergencies from police to mental health first responders. And what they found, so the Cahoots members, some of them are paramedics or mental health professionals, but actually a lot of their responders are former bartenders. Because if you've ever been a bartender, you know what it means to de-escalate a situation, right? Or if you've parented teenagers. So a lot of these situations that previously police were sent to, and then, if someone is agitated in a state of crisis, having a police officer show up often escalates the situation, or the response is to bring someone to jail and then find another service. So Cahoots is able to bring folks to treatment programs, to hospitals, give them a ride to their house or a shelter, really play this intervening social service role. And they very, very rarely have to call in the police for backup. So really cool group. And so these are some of those, the like right-hand side of the screen that we saw in that drawing of what are some alternate responses we could have in situations where we might call the police or use prisons. And then how could we prevent these situations in the first place? What's on that left-hand side? So more affordable housing, right? We all are safer when we have safe places to live. Harm reduction. So we're in the middle of an opioid crisis, and right now we are not putting enough resources into keeping people safe. Community connection. We talked about knowing your neighbors and really helping build up that infrastructure to get to know one another. Really, all of these create the conditions for safety, right? We know that most crime that happens is not random, right? It happens when people aren't getting their basic needs met, whether that's not being able to find a job that pays enough money to live on well, or if it's not getting comprehensive sex ed as a kid to learn about healthy relationships and consent, right? All of these are underlying conditions that lead to communities being less safe. So part of our work in building alternatives to policing and imagining a world free of police violence is putting enough resources into preventing situations of violence and harm before they happen, and taking that really broad-based look. So like the beginning, when we had that spider web of all the places in Minneapolis where you see police, we also can look at where we put our resources right now in Minneapolis. And this is from our pals at Reclaim the Block. Like in my bio, I said, I believe in the radical possibilities of municipal budgets. So every year I read the whole budget and see what we are spending on different things in the city. And this is the breakdown of this year of what our city spent on MPD. Each of these blocks is $10 million. And if you look, this is the health department right here, around 30 million. Civil rights is $5 million. Affordable housing out of the general fund, around 7 million. And MPD is 164 million. So when we're talking about building safer communities, when we're talking about changing the core conditions that lead to violence and harm, we're talking about shifting some of these resources, right? Okay, and we are almost out of time, so I want to share this last resource as well, which I can send the link to the group, and it's called What's Next? And I think this report has a lot of the answers to questions that came up for folks in this session and questions I hear frequently from people. So this is put together by some really amazing Black feminist organizers who I've had the opportunity to work with over the last year. And they break down what are actual steps, like what are actual steps we as a city can take to move forward to building a world free of police violence. What are some of the helpful messages and responses we can hold on to while we're facing doubts? I have them every day, you know. What are the existing institutions? So looking at those examples that I shared, I believe are all in there, along with a ton more, and they're broken down by category of response. They also talk more about policing and prison abolition and what that means, and finally offer more resources and models. Oh, Erin, will you be my assistant? Can we work together? This is incredible. So those are some of those, and I don't know, Kingfield crew, did you want to do any closing comments, statements before we wrap up? I can't remember.
I think we were just gonna offer another reminder of who to get in touch with if you want to continue these conversations. Katie, again, maybe you want to raise your hand, or okay, there she's in the chat. So you can send her a message if you haven't gotten in touch yet, to be a part of some work groups and do more with this. And yeah, you'll get more information in the follow-up email. I don't know if anyone else.
Well, let's just do, I really encourage you all to keep going deep. And let's do a one word checkout, because we are in community together. So go ahead and drop in the chat a word or two about how you're feeling at the end of this short, but hopefully sweet session. I can just read some of them out. Ready to keep talking, energized, optimistic, happy to learn about alternatives elsewhere, ready to dive deeper, glad to be a part of this. All right, well, thank you all so much. I'm a big believer on ending on time. So enjoy your sunset, and thanks so much for spending time with me. check out MPD150.com for more information about our work. And I am a person about town, so hopefully I will see you in some capacity sometime soon. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, Sheila, and
Thank you.
thank you everybody for coming.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Yes, thanks, everyone. This was very informative.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming. How'd it go? How's everyone's breakout groups?
Great.
Good. Oh, let me stop sharing. Sorry.
Really good.
Well, we might want to